to turn Romania back from its European road. Thank you.
Next, Mr. González Pons, who has 3 minutes.
Prime Minister, welcome to this Parliament, which is the Parliament of Romanian people also. We are not here to be a court. That is not the role of the Parliament, and it should never be, in any case. We are here to discuss issues that affect all of us, no matter where we come from. And the independence of the judiciary power and the rule of law are indeed that kind of European issues. When Romania joined the Union in 2007, Romanian judges became European judges. It means that they have to defend not only Romanian law, but European law too, and that we have to defend them. Europe is not a single market only. We are also a community of shared values, and when our countries signed the treaties, we signed for those values too, for all of them. So this is not an East-West issue. This is an European issue. I'm telling you this as a representative of Spain, a southern country that has had its own democratic transition. So we know how difficult it is to shift from dictatorship to democracy. It takes time, it requires sacrifices, it causes pain. It's a difficult journey. That is why we cannot understand the changes proposed by your government, which are putting in danger the balance of powers and the independence of justice in Romania. That is why we cannot understand the extreme reaction of your government that tragic day of the 10th of August, when thousands of Romanians coming from diaspora were trying just to be heard. And that's why we cannot understand the silence and the complicity of those that are concerned of rule of law in some countries, but not in others. Of course, you can ignore our critics, but you should never ignore the voice of your own people. Romanians fought for their liberties against communism. They tore down a tyranny and built up a democracy. They are a brave and a decent people. Prime Minister, and you are ignoring them. Tell me, why don't you want to listen to your people? Tell me, what interests are hidden behind the actions of your government? Tell me, what are you afraid of? That's what this Parliament wants and needs to know. Listen to the people's voice, Madam Prime Minister. They just want integrity, transparency and justice. They just want to have a better future in their own country, not out of it. Nothing more, but nothing less. Madam Prime Minister, you have two options. You can listen to this Parliament, you can listen to the European Commission, you can listen to the Romanian Parliament, you can listen to your people, or you can ignore all the democratic controls. But with all due respect, this Parliament will remain, will wait in the side of the noble and proud people of Romania. There is not another option for us. You should understand it.
La parola all'onorevole. Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Weidenholzer.
Thank you, President.
Thank you very much, President, Prime Minister. For us, Socialists and Democrats, democracy in the state of the rule of law is at the centre, and this is universal. These principles go for all member states, regardless of whether they're in the east or the west of Europe, and regardless of who is in control. We are pleased to see this debate taking place, and are very pleased also that the Prime Minister is here. We're very concerned about the reports that are coming from Romania. And we want a detailed breakdown of what's going on, without ifs and buts, not because we're against Romania, but because we want to see the country taking a positive turn. It's a country that has huge potential for the future, and that's something that can only happen if we don't stand in the way of liberal democracy. The starting point was difficult for Romania, so the CVM mechanism was brought in because of that. And we heard very carefully from the Vice President on this. And we await with great interest the outcome of the Venice Commission. And it's important to find out what the secret services are doing, because the fight against corruption is something that is central to the independence of the judiciary. We also expect that the President of the country will be at the next plenary and will tell us about what's going on. We hope that we can work in a constructive way to draw up the planned resolution that the Libe Committee is the lead committee on.
Onorevole Macovei. Ms. McAvey is next.
Mulțumesc.
Thank you. Dragnea and Tăriceanu are now attacking the European Union because lies and their fake attitudes have been unveiled, but Romania will remain in Europe, in democracy and in liberty. Romanians are now suffering because of this government that is working against them. Romania is not a group of corrupt politicians. Romania is made up of honest people wherever they are in the world, and many of them left Romania because of the corruption, but they want to go back home. The government used batons and grenades against their own citizens, and reports of the 10th of August do not lie. Independent press is also under threat at the orders of a criminal convicted felon. Dragnea decided to prepare laws in order to gag the independent press. Justice is the PSD-ALDE coalition's first archenemy. They changed the laws of justice to be able to control magistrates. They amended criminal codes to be able to evade being sanctioned for their offenses and to avoid investigations. And now they try to control prosecutor's office to be able to get their sentences reviewed and get out of prison or avoid prison altogether. Amnesty laws or amendments to those laws will get people to the streets again. Romanians are not asleep. Romania is alive, is very alive with the people, and will always protect democracy. Thank
you. Thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt. 1 minute.
Romania, colleagues, has, in my opinion, not one but two problems. Yes, widespread corruption and also Secret Service out of hand, Mr. Timmermans. And a state in the state. And my message today is that both problems need to be tackled, that Romania has to end the bad tradition of what once was the Securitate, a secret service instrumentalized by one side of the political establishment to hit the other side, and sometimes the sides are changing. As has to stop, Prime Minister, also a totally inappropriate reaction to this, weakening the fight against high-level corruption, undermining even the prosecution of it. That's the way, I should say, Orban and Kaczynski lead their countries. That's not the way we liberals should govern. Not in our name, and certainly not with our name. So may I give you one advice, Prime Minister? Don't follow the bad Hungarian and Polish examples. Embrace fully the remarks and the recommendations of the Venice Commission, and let them systematically review your legislative proposals. Because the fight against corruption must be strengthened and not be weakened. And the independence of the courts must be guaranteed and not undermined. And yes, the murky power of the new old Securitate needs definitely to be broken. The one is not in contradiction with the other.
Onorevole Skakeller.
Romania has a long, proud tradition. Romania has a very long and proud tradition of fighting for freedom and civil liberties, overthrowing a dictatorship after 42 years. And the efforts to move towards democracy and civil liberties cannot be overestimated. It's harsh, but Romania did it. Democratic institutions have been developed, and your country has joined the European Union. And it is therefore even more worrying to see that there is a real backlash. Because with the reforms of the criminal code, your government makes it legal for officials to abuse their power. Your government will allow convicted criminals to get away with the stolen money and not have it confiscated. You are de facto legalising corruption with that reform. But corruption makes people lose the trust in the state and in democracy. Money is being diverted from the benefit of the many to the pockets of the few. Romanian citizens already now lose 5 times more money to corruption than the state spends on hospitals and healthcare. And the Romanians do care. They went on the streets to ask for democracy, for good governance from you, Prime Minister, as is their right, as is the right of any European citizens. But instead of listening to them, you actually sent the police in to attack them, tear gassing an entire public square. And even further, your government is now planning to reduce the freedom of assembly, making it obligatory to have an authorization. But that would be the first European Union member state to require an authorization. But do you really want to go that low? And colleagues, Commissioner, Romanian citizens are asking for freedom, nothing else. Freedom from corruption, freedom of assembly, freedom from discrimination. And Europe is built on that freedom. And as someone who did grow up in the Eastern Bloc, I can testify to how important that freedom is. And this freedom, democracy and civil liberties are being put into question in more and more member states. And as European institutions, as European deputies, we have to defend the rights of Romanian citizens, as well as the right of every European citizen, be it in Hungary, be it in Poland, be it in Austria, be it anywhere. There is no second-class citizenship. And let's not wait until it's too late. Let's not wait until we have to start yet another Article 7 procedure. Now is the time to change, and now is the time to act. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Keller. Ms. Spinelli, 2 minutes, please. Well, people have taken to the streets in Romania. I'd like to look at a few points of things that have happened since then. The fight against corruption and for a free judiciary is crucial for the rule of law in Romania. But protests have been extremely fragmented. For some people, corruption leads to inequality. For other people, it stands in the way of the neoliberal agenda and justifies more power for the services. And there's a false unity here, and the movement is weak in terms of power play. And there are dark areas here. Pro-PSD people are spoken out against as being stupid peasants. And the opposition to the current government hasn't been convincing the poorest sectors of country folk. Let's not forget here who's been left behind in the single market. Thirdly, the movement isn't just fighting corruption, it's trying to fight constitutionalization of the family as only being a union between men and women. Our Charter of Human Rights does not impose anything to do with marriage not being allowed between homosexuals. The defense of the rule of law is a very just fight, but this also this applies across the board. Looking at the Bucharest manifestations in August, President, you talked about the shocking images of peaceful protesters who were hit by the police. We need to open an inquest straight away about this, and this also goes for the peaceful protesters in Catalonia who were beaten and the leader put in prison. And we need to look at what's happening in here, and we don't want the same situation as Spain. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Spinelli. 2 minutes, Mr. Correa.
Grazie Presidente, buongiorno Primo Ministro.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Since we've come into Parliament, we have stressed how important the rule of law in the EU is, and we've asked for constant monitoring of member states and to be able to take action when there are violations of this. We're concerned about what we've been reading about what's been happening in Romania, and I'm scared that the reform of the penal code carried out by the current government will not only undermine independence of the judiciary in favour of corruption, but weaken penal cooperation in the EU and allow for people to go unpunished in Romania in corruption. We would ask for the prescription of 1 year to be lifted for the people that are under that are being looked at the moment, and also for the penalties to the abuse of the lack of penalty to be lifted for those people that are being looked at. In Italy, we're doing the opposite. We must make sure that people are punished for these serious crimes and make sure that things are properly prosecuted and taken to the courts. Otherwise, criminals benefit from how long these procedures are drawn out. We need to make sure that we have priority for pursuing those that are corrupt and make sure that people don't get into public administration otherwise. Fighting against money laundering, I'm rapporteur for that, is essential as well, that these people don't get into public office, and people that have been condemned can't get back into laundering of money. It's important to keep criminals out of public administration. That needs to be the objective, Prime Minister, of Romania and the whole of the EU. The Commission needs to keep a watchful eye over the rule of law being respected. Member States need to properly implement this important instrument across the EU, the directive against laundering, and the fifth directive against this, which has important provisions against people that are politically against the government, and this goes particularly for Romania. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Corrao. Herr Kollege.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Bay. After Hungary and Poland, it's Hungary that's in the firing line for the Commission. As in Poland, the Eurocrats are criticising the government for reforming the judiciary, which apparently endangers the rule of law. But this is just a fig leaf. I saw this when the Civil Liberties Committee visited Warsaw. What the Commission can't stand is for peoples to take democratic decisions and for them to decide for themselves. It's been acknowledged that family policy is a member state competence, and we've got the LGBTIQ lobby, and according to them, you can't oppose same-sex marriage. In the forthcoming days, the Romanian people will be called to a referendum to validate the change of the constitution. In France, you can still be against these identitarian politics and hard-line policies. We need to respect the democratic choice of Romania, even if Mr. Timmermans doesn't like it. It's up to the Romanians to decide what future they want for their children.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bay. 1.5 minutes, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Prime Minister, 20 years ago, I worked in Romania, in Bucharest, on the laws that became your anti-money laundering legislation. I worked with intelligent, smart and caring lawyers alongside me. We worked on the international rules that finally became your own legislation. What I also remember of my time in Romania was how proud they were of you becoming an independent country, how you could once again vote for your own Prime Minister, such as yourself. And when you and your government stood and received over 45% of your nation state's votes only a few years ago, you became a leader of a country that was also proud. Be in no doubt, today you are here to be once more one of those prime ministers who are to be attacked, bullied and abused by those people on the front bench for having one simple thing: the audacity to actually stand up to them and their anti-democratic ways. You are a Prime Minister who has a vote. You are a Prime Minister that has received the backing of its people. You are standing up to those people in this room who have one vision, and that is their own vision. Now, you can go away from here understanding that they don't really want to support you. They're attacking you, the Hungarians, the Romanians. But you have a responsibility to your people first, not to this lot here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolf. Mr. Nica.
Thank you, First Vice President. Thank you, First Vice President, Madam Prime Minister, dear colleagues. I want to make something very clear for everyone. Romania will never accept to be a pawn in any game. We understand that some member states have certain concerns. However, we only ask what the First Vice President has said. Each and every country should be judged based on its own merits. We in Romania are trying to see to it that all the things which have a connection with our dark past, with our former perverted judiciary system, with the ministers of justice who have turned prosecutors in their political servants, with all those things that have turned the respectable judges into people who are afraid, of prosecutors who have been forced to concoct criminal prosecutions, of the system in which people were being blackmailed. We're trying to get rid of all these things so that everybody understands that justice is only served in court, not based on secret protocols with the intelligence services, based on darkroom deals. And I welcome the change of tone of the European Commission, and please be aware that the past will not come back despite the desperate efforts of MEPs Preda and Macovei, who are those who have turned the Romanian justice system into a shameful system. These things we do not tolerate. We are going to change them, and we're going to change them according to democratic laws. Thank you.
Mr. Nica, will you take a question from Mr. Hickmark?
No.
No. Mr. Nica. Mr. Nica. Mr. Nica. Mr. Bostinaro. I don't need a lecture from you. I am watching very carefully what is being called out. You can put a question in the Parliament, but as long as, in terms of form and content, it's done sensibly. And I will decide that you cannot call out from the sidelines. And I was asking Mr. Nica if he will take a question from Mr. Hökmark. Mr. Nica. I take it that you don't need any advice from your Prime Minister about answering this question. Mr. Hökmark.
Mr. Speaker, I have been more and more surprised about the debate here. I heard the Social Democrat group applaud the extremes up here when defending corruption in Romania. And the question I would like to raise is, aren't you feeling concerned about a government that is not sufficiently fighting corruption, but is fighting those who are fighting corruption? Couldn't you answer to that?
This is part of the fake news campaign. Has anybody told you that in the past 5 years, 98% of the corruption cases have ended in acquittals. Has anybody told you that all those people of whom the European Commission was also informed, all those people accused of corruption have been acquitted? In the past 6 years, the Anti-Corruption Division has lost 200 cases, 200 acquittals. Anti-corruption means that people who are guilty should be tried and prosecuted and convicted, and innocent people should not be prosecuted. This is our slogan.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Nika.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nika. 1 minute, Rebecca.
Domnule președinte.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, I will start by saying that in recent years, Romania has seen political decisions imposed on itself that breached European standards when it comes to the rule of law. These decisions were taken by the very leader of the PSD, Liviu Dragnea, in order to solve his own personal problems. And those who support him here or in the country know this very well. But I must point out before the European Parliament that I will never agree to have Romanian citizens punished for what politicians do in their country. No, we do not have to impose sanctions that will affect the innocent citizens of Romania that never supported Dragnea's scheming. If his colleagues in the ruling coalition are in cahoots with him, we have to take measures against them and not against the citizens of Romania. So I urge our SND and ALDE colleagues to stand up to their Romanian colleagues who support the measures taken by their political leader. And let us hope that Romania is a pro-European country.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rebecca. Mr. Rebecca, you take a blue card from Mr. Cover.
Thank you, Mr. Rebecca, for taking my blue card. This is one of a series of debates that have been taking place in here concerning the rule of law in a particular EU member state. Is this not an indication of the increasing authoritarian approach across the European Union, and how the UK, which has always been a bastion of free speech and democracy, has made the correct choice by voting to leave this increasingly federalist and undemocratic organisation? Thank you.
Care este întrebarea referitoare la
What would be your question related to Romania?
Romania? Yeah.
We are seeing increasing authoritarian approach across the European Union, surely from the right and from the left. Right-wing governments have been criticised, and now left-wing governments have been criticised. So surely is this an indication that my country has made the right choice, seeing what is happening in Hungary, in Poland and in Romania, and how the European Union do not like what is happening?
Vielen Dank, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cover. Well, I wasn't overly strict to start off with, but no extra you didn't manage to put a question to start off with, which is why we don't need an answer now. Ms. Inetfeldt for 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I find it amazing how Brexiteers still feel the need to lecture the European Union about the internal affairs of the European Union. Bye-bye. Mrs. Prime Minister, I'm very pleased that you are here today to debate with us, but I have to say that I am disappointed at your speech. The European Parliament is not the enemy. We are not attacking Romania. We are all in the same family, but we are expressing our concern about developments in your country. So I would suggest that you embrace that as a hand we are stretching out to you to help, because we're all in this together. Don't seek confrontation with the European Parliament. Don't be on the defensive, but see this as an attempt to create a culture of the rule of law and fundamental rights throughout the territory of the European Union. I'm not going to repeat what has been said about following the recommendations of the Venice Commission, or indeed investigate the claims of the interference of the intelligence services. But I would urge you to repeal the laws, the anti-money laundering laws and the laws on the freedom of assembly that are going to severely and unduly restrict the freedom of NGOs. And I would also call on all political parties, I know I cannot call on the government, but all political parties to campaign against the referendum, the anti-LGBTI referendum. And I also officially ask the presidency of this House to investigate claims that EU or EP funding has been used to fund the campaign against...
Vielen Dank, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you very much, Ms. Innetveld.
Ich bekomme jetzt einige
I've got a few blue cards requested. People seem to be saying that we've got a lot coming forward for Catch the Eye, but because of that, I need to point out that some people have extended the speaking time, so we can't take any more speaking time through blue cards as a result. Mr. Wilimski, for a minute, please.
Thank you very much, President. To clarify things at the start, I have every respect for the Romanian people. However, not for the Romanian government, the socialist Romanian government, where the leader is being prosecuted for a case where more than 20 million euros is concerned, and where there have been mass protests against a corrupt government. And for an advisor to the socialist government suggesting that they should have simply fired at the demonstrators and have a counter demonstration and to crowd them out. These are completely unacceptable. And I think that this is a piece of theatre vis-à-vis Hungary and Poland, because you are simply concealing what is happening in the socialist governments in Romania. And I can only appeal to you, socialists and democrats, please put your own house in order and not create theatre where there is nothing to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilimski. Point of order, colleague.
If I may, you should not punish anyone by taking the right to ask questions those who have the right to use this right. You should perhaps punish the very deputy who surpassed the time he or she had assigned, because they may not finish the answer, rather than those who would like to ask critical questions. This is something wrong.
Herr Kollege, vielen Dank.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your view. Now, I certainly don't punish those that speak as president of the session, and I try to do things in an orderly fashion, and I don't want blue cards to end up meaning no time for Catch the Eye. Now, I know full well that a lot of Romanian colleagues wish to speak in this debate, but speaking time in plenary is not there for just one side of a story being told. I have more than 30 speakers on the list for Catch the Eye. I'll only be able to take around 5. And I don't want just Romanians to speak in the debate. The first speaker in this will be Ms. Metsola.
Thank you. The attacks on anti-corruption and judicial bodies in Romania is worrying. The scenes of protesters being beaten are deeply disturbing. These are ordinary people on the receiving end of the baton. These were not terrorists. They were not provocateurs. They weren't even there illegally. These are the mothers, fathers, sons and daughters of Romania, Europeans whose only crime is to demand an end to corruption and abuse. That's all they want. They stood up for Romania they were promised and the rights guaranteed by the EU treaties. This should not be too much to ask. After all, modern Europe is built on the shoulders of the people who shaped history by speaking out with their lungs bursting with tear gas. On 10 August, Romanians took to the street shouting "Justiție, nu corupție," justice, not corruption. If ever there were three words that articulate what the EU must stand for, those are them: justice, not corruption.
Thank you, Ms. Metsola. The next speaker, Mr. Lopez Aguilar. Thank you, President, Prime Minister. The European Parliament isn't a foreign power in Romania. It represents Romanian citizens, and you were here in this European Parliament, so you have to understand how concerned we feel about the situation of the rule of law and fundamental rights. We would encourage you in the efforts to fight corruption, but differently to Poland and Hungary, you need to follow the Venice Commission. We do need a prosecutor's office of judiciary that independent in all countries. This Sunday in Romania, there's to be a referendum which seeks to make it legally impossible for people of the same sex to contract marriage. Please have the courage to say to Romania, courage is that you don't want any kind of discrimination on rights for anybody in Romania. Please say that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez Aguilar. Mrs. Tomasic.
Thank you, Chair. The rule of law in states which were behind the Iron Curtain is still very fragile, and this is why our efforts must go to protect and strengthen democratic institutions. We must bear in mind that the starting position of the former communist states is not equal as in Western democracies. Certain interventions in judiciary might be necessary to cleanse it from the remains of the old structures that are undermining it. But this is a slippery slope. There is always a danger to use this as excuse to subject the judiciary to control of executive, as seems to be the case not only in Romania but in most of post-communist states. This is why I believe that it is necessary to recognize and strengthen the role of individuals and social groups which can and want to raise their voices against such malfunctioning states, equally as I support the struggle of part of Croatian society which is waged against non-processing of war crimes in Croatia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tomasic. Ms. Nicolai.
Thank you, President. As a pro-European nation, we Romanians are very constructive, and I suggest, Mr. Timmermans, that today we should declare here that there is no need for authorization or respect for the law in order to protest in Europe, because this is the standard that you're imposing for Romania. You don't need to ask for permission in order to take to the streets. Well, then again, let's say we did not make enough effort to fight corruption at high level. Then ask other member states to forbid paying bribes in order to obtain contracts in Romania, because I've never seen any foreign business people in our courts of law accused of having given bribes in Romania. In my opinion, double standards have become the norm during this debate and from now on. And this does not give more cohesion, and this does not bring about more Europe. I think this is just the proof of lack of objectivity and lack of standards. I want to ask the European Commission, why in the past few years we've had no analysis concerning the situation of corruption in all member states of the European Union? Are you only focused on 3 countries?
Thank you, Ms. Nicolai. Will you take a question from Mr. Bütikofer?
For the cash DI is not possible, but...
Also erstens, Frau Kollegin.
First, Madam, we stand when we address the plenary. Secondly, it's in the gift of the President. If you wish to make the comment that blue cards aren't around, I take that as a no, and so that means the next speaker is Mr. Agnew.
It's a good opportunity, Prime Minister. I think you were on the Agriculture Committee with me a few years ago. However, I have a constituent in my region, Cube Lighting, who sold some materials to a firm in Romania, who then sold them on to another firm in Romania, who paid the original firm in Romania, but the firm in Romania didn't pay my constituent, who went to court in Romania, and he believes the official who organises the timing of the hearings kept putting them off and putting them off because he was being bribed to do so. In the end, my constituent went bankrupt. I tried to get the Commission interested because they are supposed to intervene. They did absolutely nothing. He had thought the European Union would be on his side. He has ended up lose, lose, lose. Please, can you have a look at your own country and so British businessmen can invest there in confidence? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Agnew. A point of order from Mr. Popper.
Thank you, President. With all due respect to this institution and to you personally, I would have loved if you were as firm, as strict with those colleagues who have been making noises throughout the day. Mr. Preda is a shame for this institution. It's shameful how he cannot respect people who take the floor here in this institution. Thank you.
Mr. Popper now really said that a lively debate is part and parcel of a democracy, and that allows for interjections too, provided they stay within certain limits, and I don't wish to ban them. Now, you say that one particular colleague is a shame for the Parliament. I take note. Yes, calm down. Ms. Pavel, yes, on a point of order. But I can't take two colleagues at once. Mr. Pavel first, on a point of order.
Domnule președinte, nu pot să nu observ că aveți un...
Mr. President, I have to notice that you are being very partial towards your political group. You forgot that during the 1-minute speeches, during the Catch the Eye speeches, you cannot have blue cards, but you were very keen on telling Mrs. Nicolai that she has to stand when she takes the floor. Well, I'm standing and when I'm talking. Don't forget that you represent here the Parliament and not your political group. You have to respect all members of Parliament, not just those from your group.
Herr Kollege, ich rate Ihnen...
Sir, please inform yourself as to which group I belong to. Secondly, I pointed out already, I'm not going to allow blue cards to be abused. And I said to Mrs. Nicolai whether she can take a blue card. The answer of the person in question was no. The President also decides. I said yes, and so I'm explaining to you why I was inclined to allow the card, because we hadn't heard any greens during the Catch the Eye. Therefore, I thought I'll allow it. There are no hard and fast rules in the rules of procedure about blue cards during Catch the Eye. Now, if you're rising on a point of Ms. Grappini, go ahead.
Dumneavoastră ați declarat
When I raised our blue cards in speaking time, you said you will not be able to allow for Catch the Eye and the blue cards. I showed the blue card, you did not give it to me, and you did not allow me to speak during Catch the Eye, but you maintain that you are the one who decides. This is democracy, so that everybody can understand. You say that you decide who receives the blue cards and who doesn't. I will write a letter to the President of the Parliament to this effect.
Also, Frau Kollegin Grappini, Sie...
Ms. Grappini, yes, feel free to write a letter. I've already said this. If somebody speaks too long in the speaking time and they overstep that, I don't allow blue cards. And those that had blue cards are now trying to speak under Catch the Eye. I said nothing at all as to whether I would allow blue cards during the catch the eye procedure. The next speaker is Mr. Sinadinos.
Thank you, President. Romania was accepted and was taken into membership of the European Union. And there has often been the question of expediency, and now 10 years on, the process has been, I think, has been perverted, and we're now asking Romania to change its constitution. I think that we have got to be constructive in providing transitional assistance. Clearly, there are still flaws and deficiencies in the judicial arrangements. I think that it's time for us to show support by making sure that good practice that we can provide technical assistance and help. We saw our Prime Minister, Mr. Tsipras, here, and we saw things happening which are every bit as bad as what's been said here in Salonika, and there was no protest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinitas. Mr. Jurek, I beg your pardon. I hadn't noticed you had a point of order. Go ahead.
I was critical about your interpretation, Mr. Chairman, when it comes to the overrunning of time by the speakers. But now I would like to present my critique against those who are critical about the president, because you can ask questions to each and any contribution that has been presented here in this room, and the president is fully correct by interpreting it that way.
Vielen Dank für die Blumen, Herr Kollege.
Thank you for those kind words. Mr. Mureșan.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte.
Thank you, President, dear colleagues. For 2 years, Romanians have taken to the streets in order to defend European values. People are asking for justice, people are requesting rule of law and good governance and correctness. And people take to the streets carrying European Union flags. And people ask us, what can the European Union do for us? And the answer, Vice President Timmermans, dear colleagues, must be a convincing answer. We must be together with the Romanian people. We must defend common European values. This is what Romanians expect. This is what we should do. We stand by the Romanian people. We must also know that people take to the streets against a government that is being controlled by the president of the Social Democratic Party, who is a multiply convicted felon. And when felons make laws, those laws are good for felons and not for honest people. That is why Vice President Timmermans, the Commission and the Parliament should be together, should stand by the Romanian people and defend good governance.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Marinescu.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pașcu to conclude Catch the Eye.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Doamna Dăncilă, săptămâna trecută la Bruxelles, no?
Thank you.
Ich sagte nicht Marinescu, ich sagte Pașcu.
I didn't say Marinescu, I said Pașcu.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte.
Thank you, Chair. The debate on the rule of law in Romania was expected by Romanians in by hopeful Romania. They were hoping that the European Union would rid them of the odious system exposed by the Prime Minister. To their great surprise, all they receive is threats and insults that if they don't immediately go back to the odious system that they're trying to get rid of, they will be sanctioned. Romanians, some of the most pro-European citizens, do not deserve that, because the true Romanians are the many who supported the coalition in 2016 massively and asked the coalition to reinstate the rights that they were deprived of by the secret services who promote the fake news. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege Paşcu.
Thank you, Mr. Paşcu. I'm sorry I said Marinescu as well when I thanked Mr. Murisan for speaking. Anyway, we conclude Catch the Eye. We've agreed that we'll hear from the Prime Minister once again. 2 minutes.